Yo, 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 yo,
Yo, yo.
bing bong, mob.
Bing, bong.
Yeah. Well, hello, and welcome to Three Big Things, a CineBoiz, but not the CineBoiz podcast, part of the Corkbats podcast network. I'm Kenny from Corkbats, head boy of the CineBoiz podcast, and Three Big Things is a podcast where I sit down with a guest for an in-depth discussion on specific movies and TV shows. So why is it called Three Big Things? Simple. We're going to give you three big things, sometimes more, that we think make this movie or TV show special or not so special. Probably in this case, for the movie we're going to talk about, not so special. And warning, just so you are aware of it, this is not a spoiler-free podcast. So there will be plenty of spoilers. But heads up, the movie's 30 years old. And if you don't want to listen to this podcast before you see it, it is free to watch on Freevee, or if you have a Peacock subscription, like I do, it is also free to watch there. So check it out. So this week we are discussing another Jean-Claude Van Damme movie for our last movie of Jean-Claude Van Dammuary. We're going to discuss TIMECOP. And today I will be joined by fellow CineBoi Mob. Mob, how are you?
Howdy.
I'm
good. Yeah.
Good. So we'll get into it, but I feel like I wasted like an hour and 45 minutes of my life this morning watching this movie.
I mean, it's an hour and 30 minutes. It's a tight. It's like
I watched the credits. So
no. Well, did you watch it on Freevee?
I actually watched it on Peacock.
Oh, yep, that makes sense. You just said you had Peacock, so you didn't have to do the ads. I did the ads.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't realize it was on Peacock until this morning. So I actually started watching it last night, and then I got something came up, and I was like, hey, I'll watch it tomorrow morning. And I started watching it on Vizio's Watch Free Plus platform, which is basically Freevee for Vizio, and it's on there. And there were ads in it. And I will say, this exists outside of our three big things. I think the art of watching watching a movie on TV is dead. Like when we were kids, movies were edited and formatted to be shown on TV, and they had
this one.
Yeah, clean introductions into commercials and editing out all the nudity and the curse words. Now it just seems so lazy. Yes, they don't really edit anything out of the movie. They just cut to a commercial at a terrible time. That doesn't make sense. It'll be mid-dialogue commercial.
Yep.
And I don't think kids understand how we had it growing up and how we had it so much better,
Well, and that's watching this one on Freevee. That's what kind of I chuckled at one point because I was like, this was made to be on TV at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And what's hilarious is when they had the perfect cuts for commercials, Freevee didn't put the commercials at those points.
Yeah, no. They just put the commercials in just randomly.
Yeah.
It's well, it's free, so deal with it.
Right.
So yeah, TIMECOP.
TIMECOP.
What a film. TIMECOP came out in 1994. It is directed by Peter Hyams, who actually also directed Sudden Death, which our last episode was on Sudden Death. So obviously we can see that they have a great working relationship, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Peter Hyams. In the plot summary of this film, Max Walker, an officer for a security agency that regulates time travel, must fend for his life against a shady politician who's intent on changing the past to control the future. I will say this, probably a pretty good description. Now, in practice, the movie is a lot messier than that. And we'll get into that here in a second. But I do think that it would be fair for people who have not seen the movie but want to go ahead and watch our podcast, that we just go ahead and play the trailer real quick so people kind of know what they're in for. So here we go. Here is the trailer for TIMECOP. Oh, hang on.
Uh-oh.
I'm not hurting
Sorry about that.
Good to take you back.
In the year 2004, time travel is a reality.
You are charged with violations of TEC Code 40.8, time travel with intent to alter the future.
And a crime.
It turns out going back in time is a pretty easy way to make money.
I think you got yourself a shipment of gold. You're taking to General Lee.
The genie is already out of the bottle. The technology is there.
Now, one man
You ever hear the name Aaron McComb?
is about to take the ultimate power trip.
He's gonna be president.
You don't need the press, you don't need endorsements, you don't even need the truth. You need money.
But to enforce the laws of time,
Are we still together in 10 years? Am I dead?
one man is determined to stop him.
I cannot go back to save her. This scumbag is not going back to steal money.
Stay here, Walker. My future, you're dead.
I think you planned too far ahead.
Jean-Claude Van Damme, Ron Silver,
You get him!
Mia Sara,
Yeah, dude.
Time cop.
Time Cop. So there's the trailer. And again, if you would like to stop this podcast and go watch it, it is free to watch on Freevee. But honestly, this podcast will probably be more entertaining and definitely make more sense than the movie did. The movie's kind of a mess. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get into our three big things. So me and Mob had a chance to kind of sit down and talk about our three big things on this movie. We're going to present them to you and just kind of talk them through a little bit. So I think the first big thing, that really came to mind for us is that this is kind of broad strokes, but we'll get into it. This movie just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's kind of all over the place and uses time travel in a way, just a reckless way, I would say. It's very messy. And yeah, to me, this is how not to do time travel movies.
I agree. One thing I find funny is like watching it. I think they tried. I really do. I think they tried to solve time travel because there were certain things like the same matter can't occupy the same space was like something that they said. So they were trying to like, and if you mess something up, you could change the future. And there's a point where he kicks the senator in the face, and then a scar appears on future senator's face, like things like that. They tried.
They did try.
They did not succeed.
They did not. No, it's pretty rough. There's really at no point, and I was trying to follow it to the best of my abilities, but it really seemed like there were several points in the movie where it's like, well, if they do that, then this can't work.
Right.
Right. The pieces don't add up. Like, just to use like a good example of time travel, obviously Back to the Future. Back to the Future is like the perfect movie, not just like a really good time travel movie, because they really take care to, figure out all the details. How if this happens, then this is the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Where this movie is way more like, yeah, so we need the movie to go in this direction, so we'll just kind of like make it work. And there's really no rules, like really hard established rules, just kind of little things here and there, like the scar in the face to let you know, like, oh, this does have a consequence. But yeah.
Well, they establish the rules of time travel, but they break them when it's convenient for them.
Yeah.
And then they follow them again when it's convenient for the storyline. That's the movie.
Yeah. And they also it's probably the laziest time travel movie ever made, because they're like, well, let's not go, other than like the first there's a couple of few scenes near the beginning of the movie that take place in like the 1800s and the early 1900s. But other than that, they keep their time travel within like a 10-year window.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much just like 1994 and 2004. So there's really not a whole lot of difference in like what the world looks like between those 2 years, except for just like really bad advances in technology.
Right. The cars.
Yeah.
They advanced the cars, but still put wood paneling on them.
Yes, of course. Well, wood paneling is never going to die.
Right.
Like in 1994, they were convinced, like, hey, we have found the future of automobiles, and it's wood paneling.
And for the guns, it was like, now we have lasers on them, but they're like red flashlights
to show you that time has passed.
Well, one of my favorite things is they're like, you can't travel forward because that hasn't happened yet. Fair. And then they don't explain to you at one point, we're in the 1930s, that the storyline has progressed to 2004.
Hmm.
You just see that he has a newspaper that says 2004, and my first thought was, wait, did he travel forward to grab that and then
Yeah.
travel back? And then they like explain it. But that's the type of mess the movie is. They're just
Yeah.
like, hold tight, we'll figure it out, and then they don't. But
Yeah. And the other nitpicky thing is that it's not really, and it's not filmmakers' faults. And this happens in a lot of movies that dealt with the future that came out around this time or earlier.
mhm,
That they're like, all right, we have all this new technology, but we're still using CRT TVs for
yeah,
everything,
yeah,
monitors, big screen TVs. Now, granted, they had no idea
for
that
sure.
things were going to get so much better there, but
What?
it just
Oh,
it looks it's jarring to see somebody using a futuristic computer with basically like a CRT TV.
well, and we've hit on this, but like if you look at Blade Runner, that was how many years in the future of when it came out? It was a decent amount. Like I understand where they were coming. This
Yeah,
is 10 years.
yeah,
They
yeah,
thought things were going to progress immensely in 10
yeah,
years. And in some stances things have, like TVs, but that's the one thing they didn't progress in the
yeah.
movie. It's just it's funny because you're right. It's not their fault. It's just
Right.
funny.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to bring up Blade Runner because that's like an example of like a really good movie that
Right.
didn't know exactly how it was going to, like, nobody could have predicted like cell phones.
No.
Like, well, I mean, you probably could have predicted it, but like nobody thought, like, especially if you're a filmmaker making movies in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, like cell phones are not like, you
You
don't
would have
think they're going to run the world like they do now.
Right, and you would have had to have someone from, like, Apple or Microsoft on the team to be like, "Hey, this is what we're talking about, progressing into," and they're not gonna do that, so it's at the filmmaker's, imagination.
Yeah. I feel like if they found an iPhone in this movie, like their heads would explode.
Right,
Yeah. Like,
right.
wow. We can travel through time, but this, we were not expecting
A
this.
computer in your
In
pocket?
your hand?
Like, I think they would have been shocked with Palm Pilots.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. So yeah, first big thing really as a time travel movie, not great. A lot of corners cut, a lot of liberties taken. And yeah, it's just kind of lazy. Which really kind of brings us into our second big thing. And we kind of talked about this when me and Tom did our blood sport podcast a few weeks ago. Not really. I know I didn't really grow up with a lot of Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, although this was one, TimeCop was one that I did see on TV growing up. And thought it was cool because, what do I know?
Mhm.
And but other than that, like not a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan, not super familiar with a lot of his movies. Mob, I know you're kind of in the same boat.
This is the first Jean-Claude Van Damme movie I have watched.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So with that, I feel like Jean-Claude Van Damme movies are really nostalgia pieces, except for Sudden Death. That movie's awesome. I'll recommend it to anybody. But they're really just nostalgia pieces. So like if you grew up watching these movies, you probably love them. But since we didn't, we're watching this movie for the first time 30 years after it came out, and especially a movie that's dealing with the future, which is now 20 years ago. And it's garbage. And
Right.
so I feel like if you don't grow up with these movies, you're just not gonna like them.
Yeah, I understand. Like, if I had watched this when I was 10, I would have thought it was the coolest movie
Oh
ever.
yeah, hell yeah,
Like,
man.
what's that Nickelodeon movie that was like Time Stoppers or whatever?
Yeah, Clock Stoppers.
Yeah, Clock Stoppers. Like,
Yeah,
I loved that movie whenever it came out. It
right.
probably would have been had the same appeal to me as this movie.
Hmm.
So, but like you said, I'm watching it now in my 30s, and I just like they can just do time travel better now. So I'd rather
Yeah,
watch that.
yeah. Oh, although think about like when we're in our 50s and we watch time travel movies from now, we're gonna be like, man, that looks like shit.
Right. And so that's what I was thinking. Like, am I gonna watch John Wick in 20 years and be like, oh, what was I thinking?
Right. I
Like,
thought that was the coolest movie ever.
but like in my head now, I'm like, no, there's no way. It's done so well. Like the choreographed fighting is so awesome. And like, there's no way. And I'm sure people who saw that back then were like, there's no way it can get any better than this.
Yeah. And this movie's very like 90s. So like
Mhm.
it's supposed to be really serious, but they can't help themselves and they're throwing in like all these like one-liners at every instance they get, which is just so 80s, 90s.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it takes you out of the movie if you've never seen it before and you're not just watching it to relive nostalgia. Like it's just not very compelling.
They don't well, and they don't make movies like this anymore, or they
No.
don't seem to, because
Or-
this movie was, hey, here's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
Follow along if you want, but here's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
Like you don't get that with Chris Pratt or who would be your big action stars?
Right. Well, I feel like all those kinds of movies now, if they do make them, they are like straight to streaming
Correct.
with no like marketing whatsoever. So like you still have people like Jean-Claude Van Damme and like Dolph
Right.
Lundgren and like all these people still making movies like this, but nobody ever hears about them because
Right.
they're like, yeah, we're just gonna throw this on a streamer and get people to watch it just to
sure.
take up space essentially.
And I mean, I guess you could say that's what like the Equalizer has turned into.
Mhm.
But like that's not what you think of when you think of Denzel. He's not an action star. He's just a star.
Right.
So I don't know. They just
Yeah.
don't make them like they did back then.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I mean, this movie definitely has like a quintessential like '90s bad guy too, with Ron Silver, and the Ron Silver's kind of like a Kirkland brand Andy Garcia.
Right. He's I'm the name of the character from Die
It's
Hard is
Hans Gruber,
not
Alan
Hans
Rickman?
Gruber, not
Oh.
Alan Rickman. The guy, the American who's like, give me a Coke. Bub. He's the corporate guy who sells everyone else out.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah.
yeah,
His
okay.
name escapes me right now. But that's it. They're like the same.
Yeah,
It-
yeah, no, it's like the same kind of vibe.
The way
with,
they
like,
talk,
long
the
hair,
the
short beard.
vibe. But yeah, quintessential 90s bad boy.
Yeah, and he's not. Yeah, it's not a very fleshed out character. He's just running for president, wants money. Okay, cool.
No.
I
Yeah.
guess that makes him evil. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of our second big thing. Like, if you didn't grow up with these movies, and especially this movie with Time Cop, like, you're probably just not gonna like it. And that's okay. It's okay to not like movies. We're doing a whole podcast on a movie we don't like, so it's okay. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't like hate it, but I understood what it was for what it was.
I have seen worse movies, but I will also say, like, there's something about a really, really bad movie that's enjoyable.
Right.
This movie is like a bad movie that it's trying to be good and isn't doing a terrible job at trying to be good, so it's
Right.
not entertaining.
Right. Yeah.
It lives in that weird gray zone of between like really good and really bad.
Between like cult classic for how bad it is and
Yeah,
just bad.
yeah. It's very unremarkable.
Right.
Yeah. But the great thing about this movie, which we didn't get with Sudden Death, and this is kind of our third big thing on Time Cop.
Oh, and
This
it's
is
big.
This is very much a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. We kind of, Bloodsport, the first movie we did this month, Jean-Claude Van Damme to the core. Sudden Death, again, awesome movie. Recommend it to anybody. Doesn't really feel like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. This movie is 100% let's show off those buns.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 2 or 3 scenes in this movie, like the big opening sexy scene, where it's
Mhm.
like, hey, camera on just his butt.
Mm-hmm.
Because that thing pops.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, probably like the scene that I feel like this movie will always be remembered for is the splits
Mm-hmm.
on the counter. And
On
you
the
can't see
counter.
me, but I'm attempting to do splits. to
with
act
his
it out.
with his back to the screen, so you
Right.
really see he's got shorts on this time, but you
Yeah.
really see the outline of that peach.
Yeah, dude, that thing pops. And I think the shorts only accentuate it because he's not
For
wearing
sure.
a shirt.
I think the peach emoji was created after watching this movie and that scene particularly.
I
Because
think
they're
that's-
like, we could make an emoji that's a peach, but it actually looks like a juicy butt,
yeah.
and it's Jean-Claude Van Damme's butt.
Yeah, that is I think you're right. There's no evidence to prove that, but it
Mhm.
makes sense.
Steve Jobs must have been a huge Time Cop fan,
Big time cop guy.
and
Confirmed.
Tim
Probably
Cook
in his
must
biography.
also be a big Time Cop fan to keep that going.
Yeah. And I also feel like this movie, so there's several scenes where he does the splits. There's a scene kind of near the beginning where he does the splits while he's in a fight. There's the scene kind of at the very beginning in the mall where he just puts his foot up in that guy's face.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That's
This is what
that's
I'm missing.
that's when I knew what I was getting into, was that scene,
Yeah.
particularly because it's just like he stops him with his foot up in the air and he stands there for probably a minute
Yeah.
in that pose. It's like, okay.
It baffles me that human beings can be that flexible.
And like he's wearing tight jeans.
Yeah. It's not easy, dude.
No,
Like I have a hard time just bending over and touching my toes.
I'm pretty positive that I'm one of the stiffest humans ever created.
Yeah. And it could just be that I don't stretch enough, but
I think I could stretch like for an hour a day and I would not become any more gelatin than I am.
yeah. I also like am convinced now that I used to think it was just a flexibility issue. Like if I had better flexibility and I practiced, like I could probably do some of the things that Jean-Claude Van Damme does. But then I took one of those like Apple Fitness Plus like kickboxing like exercise things.
Mhm,
I'm so uncoordinated.
mhm.
Like it's embarrassing. I can't do a roundhouse kick. It looks really bad. So that to me, like after doing that Apple Fitness Plus class, like it just makes me really appreciate Jean-Claude Van Damme more that he
Mhm.
has the ability to do all this crazy stuff.
Yeah. And like the movie, like all builds up to the fact that he can kick, essentially.
Mhm.
Like
Good
the
kicker.
closing line, he's the bad guys like with kicking like that. The only way you can make money is on Broadway. And then later on, the finale of the scene, he references that and uses his kicking to kill him.
I'm really glad you brought up that line about Broadway. Did you notice how Ron Silver like actually says it? He's like, "You should be on Broadway."
Oh no, I
It
didn't.
was so like subtle and weird, but it caught my eye. I was like, "We're probably not going to talk about this on the podcast." But he's like, "With kicks like that, you should be on Broadway."
Yeah, I feel like there's a bunch of subtle little things that we could have really
A
attacked.
lot of little nitpicky things. We would be here for days.
Right.
So
Right.
we probably shouldn't do that. Um, but yeah, here's the thing. Again, you're hearing it. We're not big fans of this movie. It's not super enjoyable, but if you are looking to watch a movie where Jean-Claude Van Damme really showcases that talent, aka dead ass, Time Cop's a good one.
Mhm.
So all right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much going to bring us to the end of our three big things. So like we do with every movie or TV show we highlight on three big things, we kind of have to ask ourselves a pretty simple question. And Mom, I'm going to ask it to you first. Would you recommend Time Cop?
No. No, I can't. I can't sit here and say like you would gain something out of it. I would just say, hey, here's a YouTube clip of the split scene. That's
Yeah,
it.
that's fair. I think that's fair. The only way I would recommend this movie is if I were to say, hey, me and Mob are going to do a podcast on this movie. You should watch it before you listen. But even then, like I can't ask somebody to give up 90 minutes of their time for that.
Here's what I'll say. If I'm surfing the channels and it's on, say TBS or something, and my remote batteries die right as it sets on TBS,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not freaking out. I'm not like, are you kidding me? But that's the only way I would watch this in the future.
Yeah. Or if somebody said, we'll give you $10,000 to watch Time Cop, then I would highly recommend.
I honestly, it's one of because it's a tight 1 hour 30 minutes. Like it's not long. I'd watch it for less. But if you're gonna give me 10K, yeah, I'd definitely watch it.
Well, here's another question I'll ask you real quick. The one that me and Austin kind of thought about when we were doing our sudden death podcast, and that is Time Cop a sports movie?
How would it be a sports movie because of the martial arts?
I don't know. Is it a sports movie? I mean, this is Cork Bats, so I think we should probably tie in sports a little bit. Is Time Cop a sports movie?
I don't think sports are referenced once in it.
No. So not a sports.
So I'm gonna go with no, but almost.
No, almost. Okay, I think that's fair. Like it could be a sports movie.
Right.
There are a lot of acrobatics, which is sport.
Right. All it needed to be a sports movie was for one of the goons to be like, "You should play football."
Yeah.
But
Well,
they never said that.
I guess we could say it's a Broadway movie
Yes, it is.
because Broadway is
100%.
referenced about kicking and,
Yeah, it's a musical.
or I'm sorry, Broadway.
Broadway.
Yeah, Broadway. Well, yeah, that's gonna do it for us here at Three Big Things. So again, we are the CineBoiz. We are part of the Corkbats Podcast Network. If you are not familiar with Corkbats, please be sure to visit the website corkbats.com. Also, check out our videos on demand on the Corkbats YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Corkbats. And you can also follow Corkbats on social media at Corkbats on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And of course, we are the CineBoiz. We are part of Corkbats. You can follow us on social media at the CineBoiz on Twitter and Instagram. And then also, we're a podcast. So be sure to rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff, wherever you get your podcasts. So, yeah, Mom, you got anything else you need to get off your chest before we go?
No.
Okay.
Fire Mo.
Fire Mo. Have they not done that yet?
Fire Mo.
Okay, cool. Also, go Chiefs. So it comes out in like a week.
Right.
Who knows what the situation will be then. Bye, everyone.